the context here, you have a heart that's beating, you have vessels, okay? The whole purpose of that entire system is to move blood through the capillaries, right? That is the goal. So we call the capillary beds the functional unit of the cardiovascular system. The functional unit of a system is where that system is doing its primary job for the body. So even though the heart gets all the attention, the functional unit of the cardiovascular system is the capillary bed, right? Because that's where the business happens. Oxygen and nutrients are delivered, waste products are washed out. Okay, not all of the tissues of our body are equally busy all the time. We've been talking about that. Some areas are busy while some areas are sleepy. Well, the control of where blood flow goes is important to match tissue needs to blood flow demands. It is silly to pump blood through all of the capillary beds all the time. It's a waste, right? And we just didn't evolve like that. If all of our capillary beds are open, our blood pressure is falling, right? So that doesn't work. So we need to have a system for coordinating the needs of the local tissue as the whole organism, as the body's activities change. All right, so these are some of our ways we're going to discuss that. All right, so the body defends blood pressure. What's going to be one of our themes. We have systems that keep our blood pressure relatively stable despite changes in body position and many other cardiac output factors. So the reason for that is as long as there's enough blood pressure, all the tissues have to do to supply their needs is open a valve, right? The precapillary sphincter. So that doesn't work if there's insufficient blood pressure. If there's not enough blood pressure in the system, you can open all the valves you want and blood won't flow through the capillaries because there's no pressure. Okay, so it's why the body defends blood pressure over anything else, even more than heart rate. It will defend blood pressure because without it, the whole system breaks down. So this is what we call autoregulation, where the tissue controls its own blood flow. Now, blood pressure does change. Subtly, it goes up and down. As the blood pressure changes, of course, the tissues have to respond to that as well. All right, so we'll talk about that element of autoregulation as we go too. So we have different levels of control of blood flow. The first is the acute control. So this is rapid changes to meet moment-to-moment demands, right? Then we have, so that's happening in seconds to minutes. The long-term control is in features like the size of or the number of blood vessels, right? If you have an area of the body that has increased blood flow, eventually you're going to need more blood vessels, right? Think about a bicep, a big burly muscle. If you bulk up that muscle, it's going to need more blood vessels eventually, right? So acute control is kind of what we've talked about so far. Decreased oxygen, increased temperature, decreased pH, increased CO2. All of those things trigger local vasodilation. That increases the flow through the capillary, fixes the problem. So far, the way we have used the concept we've used to talk about that is called the vasodilator theory. Okay, that's where when the metabolites change, vasodilation occurs. Now, there are more things that affect blood flow than just those four. Okay, potassium, phosphate compounds, adenosine compounds, and histamine also cause changes in this system, particularly vasodilation. Now, this does make sense. When tissues are busy, they tend to leak potassium, right? So the potassium in the ECF goes up. When tissues are busy, ATP is transformed into ADP or AMP, right? So the phosphate bits are left behind. The busier the tissue, more ATP is used, more phosphate remnants. Adenosine, same thing. If ATP breaks completely down, adenosine is left. So adenosine is a sign of a busy tissue. And then histamine is a little bit of a different player. It's an immune system player, but it does cause vasodilation. So when histamine is present, vessels dilate, increase of blood flow through the capillaries. Histamine actually is the reason for the redness that you get with inflammation, right? Because of its vasodilation effects. So this is what we call the vasodilator theory, that the precapillary sphincters relax and dilate in response to increased metabolites, okay? Now, there is another theory that explains the same thing. And here's the thing about theories. In the end, it's about what happens. It's not about the theory. It's not about the explanation, right? So vasodilator theory explains what happens. Well, so does this. It's just a little bit more elegant. So it goes like this. All precapillary sphincters, they want to be contracted all the time, right? So vasoconstriction is kind of their default state. So if the tissue has enough blood flow, it can stay contracted because it has everything it needs, right? Well, the oxygen demand theory says that if that tissue becomes busy and the oxygen starts to drop, the valve can't constrict anymore because it doesn't have the oxygen it needs to do so, right? So it runs out of oxygen because the tissue has run out of oxygen. That causes the smooth muscle to relax because it can't contract, it's expended its oxygen, so it relaxes and we get vasodilation. And poof, that causes a bunch of increased blood flow, bringing new oxygen, which now causes the vasoconstrictor to constrict because it has what it needs to do so. See? So it's another description of the same phenomena, that a busy tissue will increase its blood flow. This is just a different explanation that it's doing so because of lack of vasoconstriction.